There's a version of the future that a lot of people seem weirdly quite comfortable with. And that is that you die or are close to death, your brain is scanned, your neural structures copied, your memories, personality, speech patterns, preferences, emotional responses, and entire inner archive is basically transferred into a computer. And then on the other side, something wakes up. That thing speaks like you, remembers your childhood, it knows all of your friends, knows your private inner thoughts, goes on and continues your life work and says, hey, I'm Kevin, I'm still here. But here's the big question. Is that you? More specifically, could an uploaded mind really be you, or is it merely a perfect imitation of you? Because if it's only an imitation, then digital immortality is no form of immortality at all. It's merely a sophisticated puppet. And that's the question I want to explore in this episode. During the past year, I completed supervised research at the University of Cambridge on personal identity and what I called non-derivative first-personal continuity. That sounds like a bit of a philosophical word salad, so here's the simple version. Theories of personal identity ask, what makes a person at time t1 identical to a person at time t2? Is it the same body? Is it the fact that they have the same psychology? Is it that they contain and carry forward the same pattern of information? But I think ultimately there's something that slides past those theories and that they don't consider. Because when I think about myself in the future, I don't merely ask whether or not there'll be someone later on that resembles me, remembers being me, talks like me, and continues my projects. I'm asking whether or not I will be the one who has those future experiences. This is the non-derivative first-personal question. Not whether someone like me will exist, but could I survive being digitally uploaded? I think the question of uploading or the question of teletransportation makes this really quite clear. Because from the outside, an upload can look perfect. Memories might be preserved, behaviour, personality, language, preferences, projects, even mannerisms. From the outside, everybody looks and says, there's Kevin over there. But from the inside, a big question remains unresolved. And that is, did my conscious experience continue? Or did I die and something else began? And that's the whole philosophical problem. And I think a lot of the modern conversation around artificial intelligence, things like digital immortality, grief bots, avatars, LLMs, brain uploads, virtual afterlives, they're really built upon a confusion between representation and reality. The map is not the territory. The avatar is not the person. So in this episode, I want to do 4 things. So the very first thing I want to do is look at where does this idea of a mind upload come from, right? Is it from science fiction? And look at that, and also current futurism. Secondly, I want to define the core philosophical question. What would it mean for me to survive an upload? Thirdly, I want to use Charles Peirce's semiotics. He talks about icons, indexes, and symbols, and I'll use this to show why an upload could indeed satisfy representational conditions, but still fail to actually be me. And fourth, I'll consider a strong objection, which is the functionalist objection, or one that you might find coming from engineers, which is if the structure's the same and the function's the same and the outputs are the same, well, why isn't that enough for it to be the same? And then I'll explain why I don't think that objection works at all. So let's go to the beginning and start with the myth of all of this. The dream of uploading ourselves is absolutely not anything new. Science fiction's been circling around that idea for decades, and in his book, The City and the Stars, Arthur C. Clarke imagines a future city where human lives are stored and then recreated by a central computer. Later movies like Tron, which I think was in the 80s, gave us this idea that a human can enter inside a computer world. The Matrix made simulated realities mainstream. And then, of course, many people are familiar with Black Mirror, which repeatedly has episodes that talk about digital copies and the question of consciousness. And finally, we've got Amazon's Upload series, which talks about, well, it turns the whole thing into a bit of a satire, where death becomes a subscription service that you pay to access and live an afterlife, which probably is the most realistic one of all, because if digital immortality ever happens, I'm absolutely certain that some grifter out there is going to find a way to put it behind a premium pricing tier. But beneath the satire really is a very serious philosophical question, because a lot of contemporary futurist thinking treats death as merely a problem of engineering. Your biological body breaks down, your brain is an information processing system, so in principle, we just capture the information, reproduce some kind of processing system, transfer it over, and boom, the person's preserved. That's really the nuts and bolts behind the idea of brain simulation or brain emulation. Scan the brain in sufficient detail, model its structure and its activity, and then run that model on a different substrate, and you get the mind. Now, the Swedish philosopher Nick Bostrom's written very seriously about brain emulation as an absolute technological possibility. David Chalmers has written directly about mind uploading and asking whether an upload would be conscious and whether it would really be the same person. So this isn't some weird, tech bro billionaire's fever dream. It's a real philosophical discussion. And that's where I want to go with this episode today, because I think really there are three distinct claims that are going on philosophically that people are collapsing into one singular claim. So the first claim is that an upload would behave like me. The second claim is that the upload would be conscious. And thirdly, that the upload would actually be me. And those are not the same claim, because the first claim is a behavioral one. It says that the upload would talk like me, respond like me, remember the things that I know, use my phrases, make my jokes, and have my, annoying idiosyncrasies perhaps. And yeah, okay, that's possible. So that's a behavioral claim. The second claim is about consciousness. And it says, well, there's something that's like to be the upload. It's not merely producing outputs, it actually is having an experience. It's feeling things. It suffers. It anticipates. It enjoys things. It gets sad. It worries. That's a much harder claim to be making. And the third claim is not behavioral or conscious. It's about personal identity. So it's not saying merely that the upload is conscious and that its behavior resembles mine, but it is actually me and that I survived being uploaded. That's the hardest claim of all to overcome. And I think a lot of tech optimism jumps from claim 1 straight to claim 3 without doing any philosophy to earn that move. It basically says, if that thing acts like you, then it's you. But to me, that simply doesn't follow. On the grounds that a waxwork looks like me, a voice actor could probably sound like me, an LLM could be trained on my writing and then write emails like me, and therefore a future neural simulation may actually behave like me. But resemblance is not identity. And that's where I said I want to bring in semiotics from Charles Peirce. Peirce brings us three broad kinds of sign. He calls it icon, index, and symbol. Icons represent by resemblance. So a portrait resembles a person, a photograph can resemble someone's face, an avatar might resemble someone's whole body. An index is there's a causal connection. So smoke is an index of fire, a footprint is an index of a foot having been there. So an uploaded mind could be indexical because it was causally produced by a scan of my brain. So it's connected to me and there's some kind of historicity there. And the final thing we've got is symbol, which represents things by convention. So it might be called Kevin, so therefore people still refer to it as Kevin. Now, the name Kevin doesn't represent, it's not me, I'm not my name, but people accept that that represents me. So that's where we're looking at that final piece there, the symbol. So that's how we've got to imagine the strongest possible case for upload, right? So first of all, it has to be iconic. just like me. And it has to be indexical. So it has to have been caused by my brain, and it has to be symbolic. In other words, other people have to use that name to refer to it as me. But still, none of that itself proves that I survived. And that's the key move here. Because representation, yes, of course, it's incredibly powerful, because I could resemble the original me. I could be causally connected to the original me, and I could be socially recognized as the original me. But representation is not the same thing as continuation of subjectivity, right? We got all sorts of examples of this, and we could have a death mask that resembles my face, a photograph that was caused by light that was bouncing off of my body, and then a passport that symbolically identifies me. But a photograph of me, a death mask, or a passport, well, none of those things are me. Now, an upload is a lot more sophisticated than that, obviously, because it might talk, it might reason, it might even say, I'm not a copy, I'm actually Kevin. But the question isn't whether or not it makes that claim. The question is whether or not it making that claim makes that claim true. And that's where we now get to the central claim of this entire episode, which is that a perfect representation of a subject does not automatically preserve the subject at all, right? A perfect copy of my psychology isn't obviously a continuation of my consciousness. So that's, I guess what I would say, there's a gap, right? There's a gap between this analytic, so we've got externally describable relations, and then this how I'm experiencing things from the inside. And I think that's the gap that we see in artificial intelligence culture right now, because people seem to think that if you train an AI on your emails, some posts you've made, give it your voice notes, tell it your preferences, then it'll act like you and respond like you, scale up your business like you, can automate you, and then you'll just head to the beach and do some surfing while your AI clone runs your business. And that's a bit of just like philosophical sleight of hand, because ultimately an AI trained on your data is not you. It's just a system that was trained on fingerprints that you left it. And there's a big difference between a person and their fingerprints, right? Emails are fingerprints. Maybe someone's calendar with all of the things they've done or the things they're going to do is a fingerprint. Social media posts are fingerprints. Your purchase history, your watch history, your location history, those are all fingerprints, and they all reveal interesting things about you, but they're also not you. And I think that the reason that they're not you is not just that, I guess some people would say we require more data. And I think that's the engineer's misunderstanding, right? An engineer would say, okay, let's just add more data to this system. We'll get more behavioral data. We'll get more neural data, more sensor data, more biometric data, more emotional data, more context about this person's life. We'll talk to more of their friends. We'll make this model more precise. But my objection isn't that the model's lacking precision. My objection is that when you model a subject from the outside, you can't capture what it's like to be that subject from the inside, right? And this is where I like to think about Thomas Nagel's work. Nagel wrote a paper called What's It Like to Be a Bat? And basically he says there's something that it's like to be a conscious creature, right? There's something that it's like to be you. And that what it's like cannot possibly be captured by a third person description, right? A system could be trained to know every single physical fact about my brain. It could know every word I've ever written down or uttered, every movement my body's ever made, every message I've ever sent on my phone, every email I've sent, every preference I've ever expressed. And all of that information about me would still never ever become my lived experience. This is where in my research I circled in a philosopher called Henri Bergson. Now Bergson distinguishes between time as represented time and lived time. Because what we do is we actually spatialize time because we break time into units, right? Measurable chunks. But lived time isn't experienced as separate data points. It's a continuous unfolding, a flow. Think about a melody. You can list every single note in a melody. You can measure the pitch, the cadence, the rhythm, the duration, the intervals between notes. You could even model that song or that melody mathematically. But hearing that melody is not the same as looking at it written out mathematically. The experience of the song is in the unfolding of it. And I think that's how life is lived. Because life isn't just a database of different states that we're experiencing in data points, right? It's a unfolding that happens like a melody from our first person perspective. So when an uploader would say something like, well, I've copied all of the information in Kevin's brain, I would want to say, yes, but did you preserve what it was like for my life to unfold? Or have you just created this brand new shell and copied some contents into it? Because those are completely different things. So here's an argument. Imagine I enter into this upload machine. Okay, I walk into it, stand there, and it scans me. It scans my brain perfectly. Every neural connection, every memory, disposition, pattern, every tiny detail. And then it creates this digital version of me that gets put into an avatar. That avatar wakes up and says, oh, well, the upload worked. I'm here. Because that avatar remembers entering the machine. It remembers making this YouTube video. It remembers doing the research at Cambridge. It remembers making this argument. And then says, wow, I survived this. And from the outside, in these externally describable relations, that looks like a fairly compelling argument. Here's the objection here. Let's imagine that I was scanned and put in the avatar, but my biological body was not destroyed. It's still standing there. So we've got the biological me, and you have this avatar. There's two of us. Now what? Right? Because this avatar might indeed be conscious. It might even deserve some moral consideration. And it might even deserve rights. It might be looking forward to continuing my relationships, my friendships, my dreams, and insist that he's me. But it's not me, because I'm still here. So if that avatar is not me, if my biological self still existed, why would it suddenly become me when my biological self ceases to exist? And this is the problem I have with destructive uploading. Because if you copy me and leave me alive, we cannot say that the copy's me. So then if you copy me and destroy me, well, on what grounds has the copy suddenly become me? Right? Nothing's changed. It doesn't look to me like I've continued. It looks like I was murdered and then replaced. So let's think about an objection to my argument, right? So we got this engineer's perspective, or functionalists as we would call them in philosophy. And they would probably say, well, you're just being a bit too mystical here, right? You're acting as if there's some kind of ghostly, spooky essence that gets transferred, but there's nothing spooky going on. There's no soul, there's no magical first-person substance. You're just a pattern. And if the pattern continues, then you continue. And that's a pretty strong objection, and I think it deserves some kind of respect, because I'm not absolutely arguing that there's some kind of spooky soul that goes on. I'm not saying that there's this sort of glowing essence of Kevinness that would have to float from the biological brain into the avatar, because, well, as far as I'm concerned, that's preposterous. Right, but the functional objection is powerful because it asks really, well, what more is it that you want here? Because if this avatar or this upload has all of your memories, all of your values, your psychology, your consciousness, and has a causal connection to your earlier brain, then what further facts about your identity are missing here? And that's basically the move that's made by a philosopher called Derek Parfit, which is really that identity isn't what matters. What matters for him is what's called relation R. So really, if this future being remembers my life, continues my projects, loves the people I love, values what I value, and is psychologically continuous with me in the right way, then that's survival enough. And I think that is a real challenge. You know, it's not a kind of shallow tech bro challenge that you're just data, you know, just collect more data points and we'll get to being you, because I think that argument's fairly easy to just swat aside. The serious objection really is that maybe first person survival just consists in the right continuity relations and there's no further facts to be settled. Maybe asking, will it be me that wakes up, is asking for something over and above really the story of what it means to be a person. Maybe I am indeed demanding some kind of extra that doesn't exist. And that would be the core functionalist objection. However, I just don't agree with that. And here's really what my response would be, is that that move doesn't answer my question. It simply re-describes it. It takes the question of, will I have any future experiences? And kind of translates that into something else, which says, will there be a later subject that is psychologically continuous with me? But those aren't the same question. Those are completely different questions. And that's the whole dispute. Because for me, I think when I fear pain that I might experience tomorrow, or look forward to joy that I'm going to experience tomorrow, I'm not merely concerned that someone else psychologically continuous with me will be in pain, or that someone psychologically continuous with me will be in joy, that they will look forward to seeing someone that I enjoy spending time with. I don't merely hope that a future person with my memories will have a very nice experience. I'm anticipating my own future. And that first person anticipation isn't an optional extra. It's something that's built into how survival matters to us. So if a theory tells me, don't worry, someone very much like you will continue your life projects after you die, I'm allowed to say, no, that's not what I'm asking for here and not what I'm looking for at all. The point is not that psychological continuity is irrelevant. It matters enormously. Matters for our responsibility, relationships, character, legal identity, and how people treat us. But it's not sufficient to answer the question of what it's like for me to continue. That is the very problem for me with brain uploads. It shows that externally describable criteria could be satisfied, while the one really important first person question remains completely unsatisfied. Uploads resemble me, uploads caused by me, uploads treated as me, upload remembers being me, continues my project, but is it me? I don't think so. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. And if you would like to buy me a coffee, then the link is in the description, because these videos do take quite some time to think about the arguments, make sure the philosophy's tight, and then of course record them. So I really appreciate everyone's support, and I hope that you will watch another video in future.